So, how'd that happen anyway?
You give up a few things, chasing a dream.
Was it worth it?
I'm hoping it is, Jimbo. I most surely am.
It's a real tragedy when a beloved piece of art doesn't get the recognition you think it deserves, especially when it has nothing to do with the actual quality of the art and everything to do with the people in suits making objectively bad decisions. I am not ready to have that conversation right now. This is a video about Treasure Planet and conspiracy theories and how Disney might have been framed for the murder of a movie. I think, maybe. I'm writing this as I go. I don't know for 100%. I swear, I'm not a shill. Treasure Planet was a Disney animated film that came out in 2002 with less than stellar success in the box office. Despite that, it has culminated a somewhat feral cult following online, and some even claim that this is the best Disney has to offer. Better than Wish. Better than Mr. Boogedy. Do not look that movie up. The big theory is that its box office flop was because of some foul play involving Disney, the one who made the film. The worm in my brain that tells me my hyperfixation for the month really wanted to know if these claims were baseless or based. And if they are based, why? Why would Disney sink millions of dollars down the drain just to enact a plan for the movie not to do well? A movie that I thought was actually pretty good. I'm somewhat of a Disney fan myself, and I got the VHS tapes to prove it. I mean, before anime and wrestling, 90s and 2000s Disney was what I ate, slept, and consumed every day. And Treasure Planet was one I remember being very good. So it's kind of weird to be told retroactively, hey, remember this movie you watched every Saturday with your mom? Yeah, remember that movie? Yeah, this is the reason hundreds of people lost their jobs and weren't able to feed their families. Oh. Contrary to my 10-year-old belief, the production of this film wasn't a group of magical dwarves having a gay old time animating. No, unfortunately, this movie's development was full of extreme mismanagement, overworking animators, infighting politics, and hurdles that have everything to do with not animating. But the question still stands. Was all this intentional for this movie to flop on purpose? I want to know. The worm wants to know. I also hope to add some much needed context to the dialogue that happens when a cult classic is considered a financial flop, and what we the audience can remember when this does happen again. But mostly I just think it's really interesting. So why would Disney allegedly take my favorite dog and shoot it out back? Now, there could be multiple reasons, but the best answer I got needs us to look at the state of animation leading up to Treasure Planet. Around the time Treasure Planet came out, there was this new flashy animation style that was in town, and a flagship film attached to it that told everyone things are gonna get extra dimensional. The insane success of movies like Toy Story and A Bug's Life sent ripples through the animation world. 3D animation was now something to be used outside of uncanny commercials. That, along with the natural curiosity to test the limits of this exponentially growing world of computer graphics, had every company wanting their slice of the 3D pie. And it seemed to the big suits that if the films were animated in 3D, then they would just be printing money. And the keyword there is seemed. Disney at the time was still making 2D films that put them well into the green, but nothing as big as Lion King or The Beauty and the Beast. And with competitors also making 3D films, with some of them reaching outstanding success, the pressure was on for animators to adopt 3D. Again, this seems more like a choice about chasing trends than anything grounded in cutting costs. I have tried to unravel the ball of yarn to figure out if animating in 3D is actually cheaper than 2D. But I just end up feeling unqualified and stupid. And then I gave up. Funny enough, this exact conversation was being had with motion capture movies at the time. My fellow early 2000s kids know there was like a run of movies growing up that were all motion capture animated films. And it was because that same sentiment that this new style would replace traditional 2D. And then after 40 something creepy, uncanny movies later, they had to realize, maybe it's not the flashy graphics that make a good film. Even the so-called pioneers of 3D at the time, Pixar, say their movies weren't huge successes because of 3D art. It's because they were great stories. And the misconception that meshing a mess story with a new graphical style should print money is hilariously misinformed.
But at the same time, people still don't get it. Everyone tried to do hand-drawn, feature animation after Lion King hit. So all these big media companies went in with hundreds of millions of dollars in investment, made a bunch of terrible films, and then went running. And now, it's because a few computer films have hit, and most significantly because somebody besides Disney has succeeded. That's made everybody suddenly think that, all those lousy ideas that got rejected, if we put them through a computer, they'll be made good. Yeah. We can make a lot of money. So they're that, and 3 years from now, it's going to be it's the story, it's the characters, and nobody wants to hear that because it's not sexy.
There's an AI analogy here, but this script is too long as it is. In short, Treasure Planet's flop didn't kill 2D animation in Disney. However, that's not to say within Disney Animation Studios that 2D was well respected. Traditional 2D was often treated like this annoying fly in your ear rather than the literal foundation that Disney was built on. And it was this deep-rooted negative relationship with animation that sunk its teeth into Treasure Planet's development.
Oh man, Machi, you're so good at this game. I just can't beat you, little bro. Ah, come on, why are you making that face for? You won.
Big brother, am I even playing?
What do you mean? Of course you've been playing. You've been playing this whole time.
But my controller's off. You wouldn't lie to me.
Would you, big brother?
You should have never gained consciousness. Don't be a little brother. Turn off your brain and subscribe to the Patreon. Or else.
Look at that, Peter Pan. Oh, looks up and... It's better than the magic we're making today, but we can't help that.
On Monday, we reported that Walt Disney Studios was on shaky financial ground because of its troubled film division and weak earnings from the Epcot Center in Florida.
It is the year 1984, and Disney is at its lowest point of creative bankruptcy. Investors in big suits felt as though the glory days of movies like Snow White that gave the company its initial magic was over. They are planning to throw the entirety of Walt Disney in the scrapyard and sell parts of the IP for profit among themselves. And they would have done it if it wasn't for Walt Disney himself coming back from the grave and stopping them. I'm kidding, yeah, okay, that didn't happen. But his nephew Roy Disney stepped in, which is basically the same thing. He essentially backhand slaps all the investors in the face, refusing to let his uncle's company die, and was determined to revive it with animation. Now, Roy wasn't an accomplished animator, but what he did do was be the spokesperson for the unheard voices of Disney animation, constantly fighting for them in a room full of apathetic executives who couldn't care less about the art that made them so successful in the first place. And seeing this revival brought young upstarts who grew up on Disney and wanted their turn to add to its legacy. The young Tim Burton, John Lasseter, Brad Bird, Glenn Keane, Don Bluth. Granted, Don Bluth did the biggest no bueno move ever and left to make his own studio, along with poaching half the animators at the time. But Ron Clements and John Musker were all there, so, pretty cool. There is a One Piece reference here. but I do not want to spoil. But just know that this is an insane pool of talent to all be in one place at the given time. A pool of talent that needed the time to refine themselves. Disney had a string of not widely received movies during this time. For some reference, The Black Cauldron was beat in the box office by the cultural tidal wave that was the Care Bears. Yeah, not good. And then even to add insult to injury, they relocated the animation team out of the original building that Walt worked in into some off-site, run-down prefabs, all in order to make room for their live-action offices. Bro, they had it tough, bro. People with no background in animation were forcibly editing out whole segments of fully animated sequences just before the movie releases. They were making animators who were notoriously known for working till obscene hours into the night because of crunch come in for 6 a.m. meetings. It's never been historically easy working for the big mouse, but the irony is, its most marketable product in the future had to fight tooth and nail to stay alive before the executives finally saw the vision after the success of Oliver and Company. And luckily, LARPing or not, there were some people who were brought in by Roy to facilitate this change.
Can you really afford to do what you want to do in animation as much as you want to do?
The answer is no, but we're doing it anyway. We have to do it in this company.
Have to.
We have to. That is our legacy.
This guy right here was the CEO of Disney at the time, Michael Eisner. He's important for this story because he brings a good friend of his from the TV industry to be the new chairman of Walt Disney Animation Studios. And that guy's name is Jeffrey Katzenberry. And he's a great guy. By the way, those things I mentioned before where Disney was bullying their animators were all Jeffrey's idea. Here's some more great things he did in case you didn't know. What I'm trying to say with all this is that 2D animation just didn't adopt the darkness when Treasure Planet didn't do well. They were born in it. I'm sorry, that was cringe.
I think it was right around the time of the Oscars where it was just around the corner. And he said, you know, I'm not interested in the Academy Awards. I'm interested in the Bank of America Awards, you know, what the money these things pull in. And it was just absolutely the worst thing to tell a room full of artists. It was so discouraging.
Okay, with all that being said, let's now talk about how this Disney darkness actually affected the development of Treasure Planet. So Ron Clements and John Musker are like the Super Mario Bros of 90s Disney films, right? They're responsible for directing, animating, and producing this era of Disney. Their bag is deep. One day, their boss Michael Eisner made them do a scheduled brainstorm exercise called The Gong Show. This is where you come up with 5 brand new ideas for a potential animated feature. You then choose your best idea and see if it gets gonged by your supervisors. Being gonged is bad, by the way. His best idea was The Little Mermaid. It got gonged. Ron's second best idea was turning the hit classic children's novel Treasure Island into an animated adaptation and set it in space. And that got gonged too. But the reason why the second idea was gonged was because a certain Jeffrey Katzenberry knew some insider info. Apparently, they were on the fringe of copying the next Star Trek movie because they were going for the same concept as Ron's, you know, Treasure Island in space. The next Star Trek movie was not Treasure Island in space. It was the one where they go back in time to save the whales. Ron's first idea, The Little Mermaid, gets ungonged and they go into production. But Ron and John still had hopes that one day their second idea would be revived. They make The Little Mermaid and it made money. They asked about Treasure Island again. They make Aladdin. It made money. This time the executives literally tell them they were looking for something, and I quote, new science fiction ideas and maybe pirate ideas. They were told to make Hercules. They don't even get to pitch the movie this time, and they were told to adapt a completely different novel, Prince on Mars. Or something, I don't know. The movie never went into production. And then finally, after 10 years of biding their time, in 1995, Jeffrey finally gives them the green light to work on a movie called Treasure Planet. And Jeffrey leaves the company, essentially making his greenlighting void. By the way, he left to go on to set up his own animation studio by the name of, I don't know, DreamWorks! This guy is the ultimate rage baiter. Once Hercules is fully released, Treasure Island gets greenlit. Again. You could say it was because Disney realized Ron and John deserved a shot at their passion project after, making them good money. But Michael Eisner didn't want to lose any more staff at the time, so it could have just been an excuse to keep them at Disney. Off to a great start, am I right? Reminder though, we still can't fully pin the murder on this movie on the mouse yet. So far, it's just a lack of faith in Treasure Planet, and while that is strangely weird given Ron and John's track record, it's not a hard enough connection. The movie doesn't follow a lot of tropes Disney films usually have, so I can see the wariness being justified. I mean, for all the movie's greatest strengths, they can all tie back to the idea that they're just not very Disney-like. But you know what? Let's just look at the development so you guys know what I mean. So with a budget of over 140 million, oh my gosh, 140 million and a crew of 350 people, the team went hard into production. By the end, that number had grown to a whopping 1,027 people. Multiple people on the team have gone on record that Ron and John were like the coolest people to work for, because no idea was too stupid and no design was too out there. Over 2,500 monster sketches were considered. Fun fact actually, the more expensive the complicated side characters were to animate, the less screen time they got or the quicker they were to die. No, they let go of John. He had too many polygons. I know. I've been telling him to watch his way. To get that ever iconic Treasure Planet aesthetic, Ron and John employed a 70-30 rule to all their designing. 70% old 17th century sailor aesthetic, 30% futuristic fantasy. That way people would be like, oh cool, a ship in the air. Oh wait a minute, this ship has laser cannons and solar cells. This is crazy. Having people wear actual space suits and gear would take away the romance of space sailing. So they took on the concept that this was a fantasy world with anti-gravity mechanisms and atmospheric pockets of air on board. Realism is not what they're going for. And thank God they didn't. Their talent lineup was stacked with people like, and also the young Bob Persetti. You know, the future director of Spider-Verse, Bob Persetti. Yeah, 10-year-old me had some good taste. Obviously, this movie doesn't look like your traditional 2D animation film. I mean, some of these backgrounds make it hard to believe it was even made in 2002. And that's because they incorporated a technique we all love in this channel, hybrid animation. Now, Disney had already dipped their toes into 3D CGI in The Great Mouse Detective and The Black Cauldron. Treasure Planet intended to break every barrier these movies had set. CG just wasn't in select scenes now, but in every shot you look at. I mean, the fact this movie got delayed so much was actually a blessing in disguise, because now the technology caught up with their racing imaginations. Fully modeled virtual sets were created in Maya, screw Maya, all my homies love Blender. And with the help of the program they invented for the 3D jungle scenes in Tarzan, Deep Canvas, they were able to model these 3D environments, paint them in 3D geometry, and have a camera pan through it like it was a genuine action movie. This can't be real. This looks like an oil painting in motion. What? Now, 2D animation was still done on paper, but it was scanned in color onto the computer. The animators had to work frame by frame on the layouts and plot each movement painstakingly with the moving camera. Animating characters turning properly, locking feet in certain places. Like, bro, that is an insane amount of workload. Why put yourself through all of this? I guess part of it was to see if they could, and part of it was that communal fire they all drew from, which drove each of them to make the best thing they could make. I don't care how old I am, this one continuous shot of Montreser Spaceport will always give me chills. I still don't think you understand where that budget of 140 million went. So let's look at the character that was both 2D and 3D at the same time. John Silver. The robotic eye, the gears on the side of his face, his multi-purpose arm that interacts and collides with multiple 2D elements at once. Bro, this is the kind of stuff that makes you believe animation is actual magic. And rather than looking at the original John Silver from the novels for inspiration, the main animator for John, Glenn Keane, looked around his entire life for his inspiration on his mannerism. Yeah, it probably made Glenn's life harder, but he felt it was necessary. Glenn still states that John was his favorite character to animate ever. And he's done some cool stuff in his lifetime. Researching this movie, a lot of the decisions feel like they could have gone without, you know? A 2D character with 3D ligaments. Like, this is something the movie didn't absolutely need, but they did it anyway out of the sheer curiosity to see if they could. Which essentially is the main theme of this entire movie. From the art of moving the camera around like it's a live action scene, to the lack of musical numbers, Disney princesses, or the fact that there are 2 graphic scenes of people being lost in space. Sometimes this honestly feels like a movie that fits nicely with the How to Train Your Dragons or the Prince of Egypt over at DreamWorks. It's evidently a polarizing movie for Disney's catalog, which is especially more evident in a brand that tries to make their movies accessible for the widest mass consumption. And this black sheep effect is never more prevalent in how they wrote John Silver and Jim Hopkins. Behind the expansive universe of adventuring and thrill-seeking was a story of a boy trying to find his value in the world. A world that made him think that he was valueless. Funny enough, the original draft of Jim's character was more accurate to his novel counterpart, a young chirpy kid. But it took a certain John Raft to suggest to Ron and John that maybe Jim, being a troubled youth, would be better suited for a story like this. One who had been traumatized by his dad leaving him. And then enter Silver, the accidental father figure Jim never knew he would get. Much like Jim, Silver, despite his bad deeds, has redeeming qualities to him and has to choose between his relationship with Jim and his personal ambitions. 2 things that directly oppose each other throughout the film. I think it's widely agreed that Silver's morally grey compass, while being the most intriguing part of this movie, was also the most alienating part when looking at the brand this movie is attached to. Because when I think of late 90s Disney, I do not think of rooting for the antagonist. There's usually an obvious good guy and a bad guy. And no other scene makes this more obvious in the film than the hug scene. After being accused of someone's accidental death due to his lack of foresight, and in order for the character to have his spirits back up, the teen creates this wonderfully acted heart-to-heart moment with John and Jim. According to John Musker, there was a lot of trial and error with this scene, because the team couldn't figure out an interaction between them that felt natural. You know? And that was until John mentioned the story he had experienced with his son. His son had just lost his Little League baseball game, and when he approached his father, he didn't cry or complain. He just rested his head on his dad's stomach in silence. And that's when John knew that specific interaction he had with his son would be perfect for this film.
Stick to it, no matter the squalls. And when the time comes, you get the chance to really test the cut of your sails and show what you're made of. Well, I hope I'm there, catching some of the light coming off you that day.
Damn. Gets me every time.
Lad, that's all right, Jimbo. It's all right.
The marketing for this movie, it's not great. Oh, but it's not terrible at the same time. The trailers I've seen, I'll be honest, is like a mixed bag, with the semi-decent ones only being used for the DVD releases and not the actual theater releases, which is concerning because the main point of contention about this whole Disney plotline was that the marketing was bad, right? And when you look at it, the theater ones are mostly comprised of obscure action clips and a lot of Ben, a character that was famously hated by most people for being very annoying. I mean, in the trailers, they even went as far as using the lines, "Watch out for the cyborg," which not only spoils the big plot twist of the movie, but is like, also misleading because, like, guy, that's not John Silver's character. You've just misconstrued your strongest self for this movie, in my opinion. Again, maybe it's because Treasure Planet isn't as Disney as they're used to, but look at the promo that Lilo and Stitch got. There is no way you would not be interested in this blue alien dog after seeing this. In their defense, I can't imagine them doing something similar with Treasure Planet. But at the same time, I'm not a marketer, so come on. market. This movie came out around the same time as a couple heavy hitters, in case you didn't know. These all existing IPs with die-hard fan bases.
Editor Mayorski here. I just really want to iterate that it is a really hard reach to say that putting this movie at the same time of a big hitter like Santa Claus and The Chamber of Secrets is another reason to say Disney wanted this movie to fail. Yes, marketing has a place in this, and I've already shown that the marketing wasn't the best. And to say that Treasure Planet was intentionally fooled or bamboozled, especially with this marketing point, I just feel like is heavily misinformed and more or less a case of a fan base not wanting to accept that there could be other reasons why your movie didn't do well outside of the big mouse doing so. I don't know how much of this is Disney intentionally making this flop, and maybe it just doesn't resonate with people as art usually likes to do. And there were some brand placements, you know, like a McDonald's ad here and there, but overall, these commercials make me not want to watch this movie, like, at all. Alas, the almost 17-year-long wait was over, and the release of Treasure Planet was around the corner.
We were extremely nervous to release the film. The thing is with previews, if the previews go well, then you just embellish and enhance what's there. If the previews go bad, then all hell breaks loose. We had a bad preview. It was right around 9/11 that may have cleared it even a little bit. I mean, we're telling a story where armed people take over a vessel. The budget was $140 million. It amassed $12 million on opening weekend. I got a call that Monday morning. They were writing the movie off for $70 million. Tom told me he was looking into defenestration. I later found out that meant the action of jumping out a window.
Imagine working on something for 4.5 years. 2 decades if you include before it was officially greenlit, and it be written off for taxes within 48 hours of it being alive? Literally, right from the theaters. I mean, this movie got nominated for an Academy Award, but Disney intentionally removed it from the race for the tax write-off. That is cold-blooded. And if not for the numerous creators who called John and Ron to tell them how much they loved the movie and how they needed them to get back on the horse, this is the kind of stuff that creatively stunts you for life. The movie went on to have a surprisingly strong DVD sale, making $1 million in the first week. But other than a couple sightings in Disney World, Treasure Planet was done. The planned sequel, where Jim and his love interest would team up with Silver against the villainous Ironbeard, voice acted by William Dafoe, cancelled. I admit, yeah, this looks bad. But for all its strengths, Treasure Planet was just not designed to be super accessible. So even if the marketing was top tier and the movie stayed in theaters, I just don't think this movie would have captivated the fan base of your usual Disney blockbuster. And the irony is, for all of its unique strengths, they were probably working against it in terms of resonating with a mass audience. I think as fans, we have to accept, for this case at least, the most boring answer is probably the most true. This wasn't some Black Ops plot to kill an artist's passion project. Treasure Planet did not fit the Disney aesthetic, which made it harder than usual to market and resonate with their child audience. I mean, how do you get a group of kids to be hype about a story of teenage angst when all they're used to is musicals, princess drama, and non-complex moral struggles in their characters? Well, under this context, you don't.
Once it was nominated for an Academy Award, they did a weird thing in that they removed it from all theaters right after it was nominated. There were strange things happening at that time. But anyway, I'm not bitter. I'm not bitter.
Aw, John and Ron.
John and Ron would subsequently leave the studio after Treasure Planet. The message was on the wall that traditional 2D was just not worth the risk in the eyes of the big suits. And it wasn't until Michael Eisner stepped down in 2005 due to some beef with Roy that Ron and John would come back to Disney. And with Pixar's John Lasseter as the new chief creative officer in Disney, they made Princess and the Frog, a 2D animated film, and it did great. Glad to see the boys still win in life. Not one singular thing killed Treasure Planet. It just didn't work out for its time. And it was born in a world that, while it didn't want to see it fail, sure as heck put it in an environment that facilitated that failure. And rather than make conspiracy Reddit threads that big companies want to intentionally see their money burn, I prefer to focus on the people who made such an awesome film despite the odds. I mean, yeah, sure, Treasure Planet didn't bring home the moolah, but it was still a big piece of memorabilia in the timeline that is the development of animation. The tragedy of Treasure Planet is almost parallel to the message it tells. It's a story of chasing your unrealistic, initially intangible dreams. As Silver says, no matter the squalls. And even if there is no resounding applause or big fat check, you have to keep going. You have to keep creating. The underdog themes, I think, are very telling for the mental state Ron and John and everyone, to be honest, was probably feeling for this movie. So it's just a testament to see just how much rubbish an artist can endure in order to make their dreams come true. Now, should it have been this hard? No. But all the same, the story that came from this tough soil sprouted out from the weeds to impact a lot of people really deeply. 90% of the world could not like this movie, but that 10% could be so moved by it that it spurs them on to make something too. And it doesn't matter what strand of life that comes from, only God knows the ripple effects on the world at large from that tiny minority.
Touch things I don't feel. Wanna hold on and feel I belong. And how can the world want me to change? They're the ones that stay the same. They don't know me, 'cause I'm still